Trent Williams, left tackle for the Niners, like literally probably the best old lineman I've ever played against. You ain't trying him because he's more athletic. He's faster than you, probably better looking, stronger, the whole 9 yards. You don't have any advantage. So just play your position and roll. But then there's other chances you have to take. Because if you're just a robot, especially in the NFL, right, and you make the plays coming your way, it's great. But in the NFL world, they're always trying to replace you with somebody cheaper and younger. So you got to really find that balance of being a consistent performer they can count on, but also you got to make plays. You play linebacker in the league, you got to have takeaways. You got to be on fumble recoveries, causing fumbles, getting interceptions, all while doing your job and making tackles. If you're rushing the passer, you sure as hell be getting to the quarterback, right? That's your job. And if you're not, they're going to find somebody cheaper, younger to do it.
Welcome to the Gallery and Hurley Unfiltered podcast, Iowa Football Rewind.
Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast player to get a behind-the-scenes look that you won't find anywhere else.
We're excited to have Chad Greenway on today, All-American, All-Pro, linebacker from Iowa, 2002 to 2005. Chad, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Good to see you. So I guess my first question, I found this on the internet, reduced football. Is that the proper term?
What's that, for 9-man?
For 9-man? Yeah, it's a 9-man. I was like, is it 8 or 9?
Yeah, I grew up playing 9-man. Yeah, it was funny. So I grew up in Mount Vernon, South Dakota. Population 368, I think was what the sign said growing up. Graduated 26 kids in my class. 9-man football was like totally normal. Everybody in our area played 9-man. It was like if you played 11-man, you were from the big city, big town, 15,000 people in the town next door played 11-man. And it's so funny how that was just what you did. It was normal. I had never played 11-man football until I stepped on the field at Iowa for my first practice. I always wondered why the hell they need these other two guys, but the reason is because the field's bigger. We played on a smaller field, so yeah, a reduced size field. But you know how it is growing up in small town, man. That's normal to us. So we do play 5-man basketball though, and 9-man baseball. So just so everybody, we clear that up.
Yeah, gotcha. We had 6-man basketball for a while, so we've got these small towns got to do what they got to do. The field's smaller. I thought you had a bigger field, so I was like, wow, that's a huge advantage. If you just have more real estate, you could do a lot more damage.
Yeah, we played on an 80 by 40 field. It was like the home field. But then the funny part was when we went to the state championship game, it was on a full field. So they didn't reduce the state championship field at all. So like you had all this extra space with two less guys, which did matter big time. So there was certain games where you'd get a full field and you're going sweep right, sweep left, you're getting out on the edge and just getting people in one-on-one situations. Pretty good for a high school player. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, man.
And do you think that was an advantage for you to play in that situation?
I think growing up, and I think about football this way, it's really just a sport for athletes in general, right? You think about, you play soccer, you play hoops, you play baseball. It's more of a specialization, right? You have to be able to hit a curveball, have to be able to hit a baseball. It's golf, right? You have to refine your swing over thousands of hours of muscle memory. But like Daniil Hunter, my NFL teammate, was just like 6'5", fast, athletic. He started playing football his junior year in high school, and he's, oh, by the way, he made $150 million in the NFL. You can be a freak athlete and just kind of show up on a football field and go do these things without having to specialize. So I always thought my biggest advantage was being from a small town was that I was forced into but wanted to play 4 sports. So it was baseball to track to football to basketball. And I think just that athleticism piece is really what kind of led me down my path anyways, of just being able to move my body, being able to run, getting on the track, playing quarterback, playing safety. All of a sudden you go to Iowa finally, and you're like, okay, I'm going to take all these 4 sports. Now I'm going to reduce it down to just lifting and focusing on football. It's like I hadn't peaked when I got to college. I was just beginning. A lot of us guys that go to Iowa is like, you get good because you haven't specialized. You haven't found that one spot you really focus on, and then you start to get better again.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't allow as much for burnout either, for mental probably and for physical parts. The kids getting surgery on their arms for throwing baseballs 100 miles an hour for 6 years straight or whatever it is.
1,000%. And also, like, I always think about, there's a couple guys that were big time recruits when I came in, 4 or 5 star recruits. Coach Ferentz was starting to get things turned around with the Alamo Bowl, a redshirt year, and you could see the recruits starting to ramp up. Like you could tell the program was getting stronger from who they were recruiting and getting. But those guys came in as more finished products. Those were guys that they had reached their peak, so to speak. definitely had room to grow and get better, and they did. But a lot of the guys that came in from smaller towns or smaller programs that played a bunch of sports came in and then they just took a big jump and leap. And you see those guys transcend and get to the position to eventually be a pro or whatever else, or have great college careers. It's fun to see how that worked.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw an article about the athletes that didn't specialize till they got older, and it was like 80% of the pros were not specialized until they got to be like when they're kind of 18 to 20-year-old years, which I thought was interesting. And people these days, I think, really are focused on kids, one sport, one activity. Like they really try to pigeonhole the kids into doing that. And I think I guess this remains to be seen how that works out long term for a lot of these guys too.
Yeah, listen, I'm a capitalist. I like when guys can make money and go out and start a business. But what has become in youth sports is, I'd like to say in layman's terms, a bunch of PE teachers that say, hey, I can go make more money doing this. I'm going to go start an AU program, or I'm going to go start a 7-on-7 football team, or I'm going to go start XYZ sport and create a business out of it. And I'm going to force these kids to do this year round because it helps me make more money and build more programs. It's just, let's be honest, it was a hell of a lot better growing up in the 80s and 90s playing youth sports than it is now.
Music, everything too, right? Clothing, the whole 9 yards.
Absolutely. You put on some Alan Jackson radio in the car, like you're not going to sing every song. Come on, every song, every lyric. Absolutely.
That's great.
I had a question about the 8-man and 9-man. So what's the difference in the positions for those that don't know? I'm not even sure I know who they're taking out, lineman or another position?
Yeah, we see it a bunch of different ways. We took out a lineman and used the tight end as a lineman, and then he was an additional receiver on the end of the line of scrimmage. But we went shotgun, and we spread the formation out just because you did have less guys, and you're trying to scheme somebody up. We went unbalanced line a lot. So just different things. But we would rarely play with – we usually had one receiver. So technically we'd take a receiver out and a lineman out is how we looked at it. But just like anything in football, like we ran a ton of read option back in the day, which a lot of high school programs were doing. We threw the ball a little bit, had some good athletes out there to catch the balls. But think about the guys that came to Iowa as quarterbacks, as tight ends, as these other positions. And then all of a sudden, Robert Galler's playing left tackle. Chad Greenway's playing linebacker, and he was a quarterback. You have these guys that were really good high school players in these other positions. And then Coach Ferentz in our generation was coming and saying, hey, we're going to move you here. This is where you fit the puzzle piece. So it's just, again, like being a part of that as an athlete. That's what college coaches love to recruit. Because now we can form you into whatever you want. I think just that 9-man game of more versatility helped me a lot in that way.
Yeah. So you talked about Coach Ferentz. Let's dive into the recruiting piece, if you would. Where obviously the Hawkeyes came after you. Who else was in that mix that you were looking at that age?
Yeah. So I think when I was growing up, I mean, it really was like USD and STSU, NDSU, all those what are now really good Division I AA programs. We're all D2. The old NCC, I think it was the conference they played in. It was like a really strong conference. And so I was getting recruited mostly by USD and SDSU because I went to their team camps and they saw me as a sophomore and a junior. I didn't really start getting bigger interest until I got invited to a Nike Combine, whatever that means. And that was at the University of Colorado when I was going into my senior year. And I went there, and I'll never forget this, that Kyle Orton was there, the quarterback from Des Moines area that obviously went on to Purdue and the NFL. And I saw what a real quarterback actually looked like and how he threw the ball. I was like, okay, this is another level. But I ran well. I performed well in the camp. And I started getting my name out there. So I started getting letters from like Wyoming, Nebraska, never really Iowa hardcore until my senior year when we played our state championship game. So really where it popped for me, I had no actual offers. D2 schools were talking to me. But then my senior year, we played in the state championship game that was televised. And I don't know. I can't remember first. Is it John LaFleur or Matt LaFleur? I can't remember. From South Dakota, but played at Iowa.
John.
Yeah, I think he lives in. John. Did you play with him?
He was. Yeah, he was my age. I played in the Shrine game with him too. Yeah.
Yeah. So great dude, right? I don't know this person at all at the time. The story as it's told to me, as I find out later, is that he made a call on my behalf after watching me play, and essentially connected the dots for Coach Ferentz and the staff. Next thing you know, I send highlight tapes. Next thing you know, Reese Morgan's in my school in South Dakota looking me up and down, and then eventually I get invited to the Northwestern game to take it in. And Coach Ferentz is literally pulling on his coaching pants before that game. I walk into that little coaching locker room, remember the old locker room, and he's in there and he's basically telling me he's going to have a scholarship for me available. And I go back to my seat, and I think he just offered me a scholarship, but it's one of those things I had never happened to me before. So I'm like, I think that's what he just meant. Like, how does this whole thing work? You're just so naive. And my parents were no help, and they had no idea. I'm sure your folks, when they first started with you guys going through it, it was the same way. And then eventually you start to figure it out. And Coach Morgan actually followed up and said, hey, he just offered you a scholarship. And so we go home after that game and thought about it. And obviously a couple of weeks later, I commit to the Hawks. And that was the end of the story. One official offer. I went to Nebraska on a visit, and they offered me a chance to walk on. And that was, but I was like, we're broke farm kids. And it was just like, what do you mean I have to pay? Yeah, okay, I'll take the free. I like free. Then you're a Hawkeye. And away you go. It was really that simple. One offer, and you say yes, and you move on.
And I think at that point, you're like, if I don't have to work on the farm, that's even better. I think my dad gave me that option when I was a kid. He was like, you can either work at the farm or you can go do stuff at school. And I was like, okay, I'll be on a play. I'll sing. I'll do all this stuff. So I definitely know that feeling of I don't want to pick up rock and all this other stuff that comes with being a farmer.
Fix fence, move pigs, load pigs.
You guys did the hard part, with the livestock. Yeah,
I do a lot of speaking, and I equate and relate so many things from my childhood in the farm and developing as a young leader, quote unquote leader, because you are thrust into these responsibilities for like your family business as like an 11-year-old, and your dad's like, hey, load the truck up, drive over to this pasture and fix the fence and take everything you need. There's no cell phone. You just go and you figure it out. I always talk about this idea about being really resourceful. Like you just figure stuff out because you grew up on a farm. Like I'm just going to Jimmy rig this, fix that, find a way to get something done. Get on campus and you like Coach Ferentz's leadership qualities and the whole program was just like, oh, this is what they mean when they talk about leadership and being a part of a big group, integrate into that. And you take all this, the farming background that I think that we certainly had, it makes it easy because you are always part of a team working on the farm. You're out there picking rock as a group, throwing shit at your brothers, right? That's just part of what it was growing up, and that's just became what it was at Iowa. It was just an extension without the chores, which was sick. Like you would just like go to school, lift, and practice. And you're like, oh yeah, Dad can't use me for chores for the next 4 hours when I get home. Sweet.
That's great. I guess a quick sidebar, you're talking about the speaking thing. Was that something you did on your own, or did you see like the value in it? I guess that's one of the pieces going through a college program and being in front of a camera at times and those things. That was one of the things I felt like I never really got good at or didn't practice enough or didn't have that guidance to say, hey, this should be one of the things that you need to do. To speak about that quickly, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I come from a background, like my grandmother was a politician in South Dakota for 24 years before she passed away. So she was always really comfortable in front of a mic. I saw her, I observed how she handled herself. So I was always interested in it. And then I go to Iowa. I was scared to death like anybody else to get in front of a group and talking. But then I worked for the university after my sophomore year, going around and going to all the fundraisers all across Iowa, from Manchester to up northwest Iowa, all the way down to Creston, like literally Council Bluffs, all across the state of Iowa, driving or flying. And I'm a part of these fundraisers for the athletics department to help raise money for scholarships. And Norm Parker would be talking about our defense and the team. And it was just really cool experience. But every time I went to one of those, say 30, 40 times over the course of my 2 or 3 years I worked there, I had to get up and give like a 10-minute, here's what it's like to be an athlete. Scared to death, right? Stumbled over my words, just massive neck and long hair and really nasty, gnarly teeth and this whole thing, right? And I'm up there and connecting with the Iowa fans in so many ways as just a 19, 20-year-old kid. And then when I got into my NFL career, you start getting these requests and asks about going to speak to groups, and you pick and choose your spot. Then post-career, about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I really started taking it seriously, where I go out and do keynotes, and I relate my career, where I came from, the farm background, into what that looked like and how I was able to not only achieve things, but also stay in the NFL for 11 years in such a competitive environment. Like what advantages do you find? What leadership tactics do you have? So it's been a really interesting kind of segue for me. And I'm, like anything, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. And now I'm getting up and giving 60 to 75-minute keynotes, and people hear that and they're like, what are you talking? I'm just like, but once you do it and you get over that, you're the guy on the stage. It's almost like you're performing like you were playing football. So it's a different level of energy and anxiety, which is fun to have once in a while.
Yeah, different rush, I'm sure. We've got some friends that do like these 10,000 people deals, and I'm like,
Yeah.
seems like the worst spot in the world to be at that point. So
I
yeah, it's
I
terrifying.
haven't gotten that big yet, but someday. I've done some bigger ones. The one I was the most nervous about, it was actually my dad was getting his care at the Mayo Clinic. And when he was sick, it just been 2013-ish, 2014-ish. So I'm right in the middle of my NFL career. And it was Mayo Clinic was celebrating their 125th or 150th year, 150th year maybe of being open or whatever. And I had this speech in front of this massive crowd at the Rochester Event Center, and literally four teleprompters. Like you had one, like two center stage, two opposite. Like you had to have a speech written that Ted Brokaw then edited because he was the MC. It was this massive event. And I'm like some slappy up there. I didn't have a lot of experience at that point. And you read it, and I look back at it. I actually have a film of it, and I look back, and it's just like hilarious. Like you're trying to read these teleprompters and feel natural and talk to the crowd. It was just like, but it was nerve-wracking. Like it was way harder than playing in front of 70,000 people playing football. That's for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thanks for going down that road. Let's dive back into the Iowa part. So you basically come out of nowhere. You weren't really highly recruited. I mean,
You're
were
a
you
quarterback, right? You said that's
you're-
where you're getting recognition as a
Yeah,
quarterback?
quarterback and safety. Yeah, I never
Safety.
played linebacker until I got moved there in college.
and you were, I don't know, as far as like your track career, where you were super fast, weren't you? I guess I remember the Chad Greenway
Yeah.
was super fast. So
Yeah, I mean, I love track. I still have the state triple jump record in South Dakota, and I had the 110 meter hurdle record for a while until somebody broke it. Unfortunately, I wasn't elite track fast, but it helped me a lot in my speed for sure.
yeah, it's interesting that you were able to fly under the radar like that with that kind of talent. Talk to us about when you get to Iowa, like your first year there, the transition going from a smaller town, smaller school to that spotlight, and like how that went.
Yeah, I think I always talk about this in reference. I think the one emotion I could probably relate when I went to Iowa and before I got there, just that anxiety, was fear. I was so scared to go there and fall on your face. I think we all have that in our life, right? At some point where you're like, man, if I go put myself out there, like what's going to happen? Am I really good enough? I'm small town. Everybody's telling you all these mountains you have to climb. And then when I get on campus and you start to meet all these guys, you're like, wait, like 75% of these guys are just exactly like me, grew up almost exactly like me. Maybe their town had 5,000 people instead of 500, but the reality was like we're all the same dude. And then you get into the program and like it's not about who you are, what your name is, or how big a recruit you were. Like that was the best part, I think, in my experience, is when you walk in that weight room with Coach Doyle or you walk on the practice field with Parker or Kirk. They just wanted to find guys that wanted to help them win or could help them win. And you're in such a culture of guys that just wanted to work. And it wasn't about them. And that's certainly the way the culture was built in that young Coach Ferentz era. You get in, you work, you break the rock, which is what we always talked about. You can become one of this big group. And it was amazing. And once I got there and started to work, it was like all the other stuff, the underdog kind of mentality I had really helped me, because that's what our whole team was. Like you run out at Penn State and you see how these guys look. They're all 6'3", 265 and shredded. And we're like, we're not going to beat them in the contest that way, but fundamentally and as a team, we're going to be better than them, and we're going to be hard to beat. And that experience was incredible. And I adjusted pretty quickly. The thing about it was I never really lifted weights before. I just had worked on the farm, and then it was just doing sports. So then by the time I get to college and I started lifting and really putting in protein, I moved to safety kind of full time. And before I know it, I'm like 220 and 215, 220. And the staff's, my frame just put on weight in a good way. And then I remember it was like around Christmas time, my redshirt freshman year, they're like, we want to move you to linebacker. So for spring ball, I moved to linebacker. And I can remember vividly, like the first couple of plays, the first series of playing linebacker and like trying to figure out where my eyes should look, like the reads, like it's so different from playing safety. But I figured out really quickly and soon understood that is exactly what I was meant to do with the really good coaching. And once I got that, it was great. I went to that spring and played good. And then I tore my ACL right before the spring game and had to reset and start over. But the idea was like, I'm playing backer now. I got to put on some weight, get strong, stay fast and mobile. and away we go from there.
So this is going into the 2002 season, right?
Yep,
The spring
exactly.
before
Yep.
that season. Okay.
Yeah, so Alamo Bowl, and then we come out of the Alamo Bowl in the spring, and that was my chance to like really prove that I could go play in that spring. And you had a good spring. You start climbing there, going from the 3s to the 2s. Maybe you're flirting with some 1s, and some really good players in front of me, and you just trying to keep your head down and keep working with no expectations. I think that was the biggest thing. I didn't have expectations of I need to be a starter. I can remember I ran out of the tunnel the very first time when I was just a redshirting guy. My jersey didn't fit, looked sloppy in the old 18. And you look at the crowd, you're just like, if I could ever just play, if I could ever step on this field and just make an impact, like if I could ever run down and kick off and make a tackle and hear that crowd, like there was no expectations of that was expected. It was just like such a motivating piece to like, I want to find a way to make an impact at some point. Senior year, can I get it done? And then as soon as you come out the next spring, you just go to work and you're going through all the strength training and speed training, your body, it works out. And then, yes, and you go into 02, I turn my ACL, I come back and play some special teams. I played in a couple games, played linebacker for the first time, a couple games coming off an ACLs, dragging a leg, but then really got going that next spring into my sophomore year where I won the position battle that going into that next year. My first start was against Ben Roethlisberger in Miami, Ohio in that 03 season. And that was the rest is history.
When did you feel like first that you were worthy of that scholarship when you're on campus and you feel like I can compete, I can hang, I'm good enough, I'm not overwhelmed by some of the guys who were more mature or more developed at that time? And then when did it sink in, I can play big time football and I'm actually pretty good at this, and it's starting to slow down for you? For those kind of time periods?
Yeah, you do have. There was this idea of can I hang? I talk about that fear factor. Like, I think the thing that really solidified that I knew I was going to be okay was just after you go through training camp and then school season starts, and you're on scout team, right? And you're taking part in that. I was starting to make plays. I was getting more comfortable with the guys. Like, you feel integrated into the team. You find your circle of guys you're hanging with, and maybe going to the sports column with, and enjoying that. It's like you're part of the team. You're in the mix. You're comfortable. But really, for me, it was in the work. I was willing to every day go toe-to-toe with all these teammates that I loved and compete with Abdul Hodge and compete with these guys that were just really talented athletes, and just iron sharpens iron, man. Just day after day after day after day. 100 days in, you look around, you're like, okay, like these guys are all big-time recruits, but I'm doing as well, if not better than. So I know I'm on the right path. Just keep your head down and keep working. And I think the first time it really set in that I could be a really good player was just that first start. When I came out, I was actually healthy off the ACL. I came back that sophomore year. I was a year plus removed from that ACL, moving how I could move. And in that game, I thought I played really well for my first start. And you knew I'm only going to get better from here. I'm only going to get more experience from here. I belong. Of course, you weren't thinking at the time like, oh, I'm going to go be an 11-year pro. That was not ever – you just didn't think about that stuff. I just thought about the next day. And that's just because the culture was so good. That's just how we all thought. I don't think there was anybody in that locker room that thinks I'm here so I can go pro. Nobody thought that way. Yeah, I'm sure Rob, like in his years, like he's not going to show up and do this and then be a top 3 pick in the draft. It just happened because you just had your head down working. And that was the whole mentality of the whole team.
So you think it was that kind of go to work every day, just little building blocks over and over again, and that just set the table for the rest of the journey then, right? You just continue to do that.
Yeah.
Going forward is what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, but that sounds easy, right? But that's so hard for a program to be like that lunch pail mentality. Because really, to speak frankly, as I going into my senior year, and then as the program kind of 06, 07, 08, you start to see this little bit of a lull in our wins and how things were turning out, because we got access to different players in recruiting. If you think about the guys we were recruiting in 99, 2000, 02, 03, the Bruce Nelsons, their Sean Constantines, their Derek Pagels, their Bob Sanders, these guys that were all just diamonds in the rough that the staff was willing to take a shot at, myself included. Like, they were willing to take a chance on these guys. And these guys come to Iowa City and just blow up. They turn into just something they didn't really expect, they hoped for. That's why it's about developing players. That, to me, is why Iowa's been such a shining example of how to do it the right way, is because it's about development. So it's easy to say, Yeah, it's just day at work, day after day, but programs can't do that, especially now when everybody's getting paid. It's like, how are you going to survive in that mentality now? Because like as soon as I don't get my way, I'm going to take my ball and go home and move to some other school. So it was just the golden era as far as I look at it, of being able to do it the right way with the right guys and then have success, which was sweet.
Yeah, for sure. And it's tough with anything, right? In life, you just to continually set good habits in that, right? There's always distractions. There's always, you have to have a motivation and those things. I think at least I was close to the program because my brother was playing. I think at that point, you guys were so strong comparatively that like when you watched the games, you just were physically a level above everyone else. And I think maybe at some point that caught up too, where these other schools were like, oh wait, what are these guys doing? They're moving tractor tire, Caterpillar tires, and like benching log chains, and just some of this intense weightlifting
just
training.
Just a bunch of meatheads just getting after it.
Smart guys too, though, but just some like physical shit, and you're just like, wow, these guys are really just manhandling people. I remember, like you say, Bob Sanders coming in and just like knocking people out, right? It's just like, wow, that is not that a human should not be able to hit another human that hard.
Literally a missile. I think to your point, I think the phrase that Coach Parker Norm used was impose your will on people. Like just be unrelentingly strong, physical every snap until a team is unwilling to continue to do it. I think that was the best probably sentiment or statement about what really happened in those games and moments is we just were unrelenting. And we defensively specifically, we played like 4 defenses my whole career. Like, we're not exotic and going to do all these sexy blitzes and show you this and do something else. It's like, we're going to line up in this and you're going to have to beat us. You're going to know exactly what we're in. Can you scheme us? But fundamentally, because football is the ultimate game in that way, I have to do my job so my buddy can do his, and then so he can do his, and on down the line for the 11 guys is like when you just hold the line and not try to say, hey, I'm going to go make a play, even though it's not my responsibility. It's like, no, we're going to do what we're supposed to do, be in the right spot, and then the guy who's supposed to make the play is going to make the play. It's easy to say those things, but it's hard to get teams to do them. So that's where the discipline comes from. And it comes from, like you said, it's like it started in the weight room. It started in the practice fields where we just hold each other accountable. And everybody's willing to instead get defensive and bow up their neck and say, hold on a second. Yeah, you're right. I got to do better. I got to do this. I got to work harder. I want to live up to the way Bob Sanders plays. And it's these guys that certainly I don't take credit for it, but the guys I look forward to watch that line with Steiny and Rob, like to go against those guys as a freshman and have to go compete against these guys in scout team. And like Abdul and I were giving them the business. But these guys are the best old line in the country. And so that made us better. Iron sharpens iron. Like all of a sudden, like, sophomore year, everyone's like, yeah, these guys are damn good. It's like, yeah, but we've been doing that behind the scenes for 2+ years against maybe the best old line in the nation. So we were going to be good if we kept our head down and working. So it's just this idea that it's like you just work and keep your head down without these extrinsic motivations of the draft. And me, it was just about the team being strong together. And it just worked, man. It's just incredible. But there's 2 guys that I think about in my career specifically that I was on the field with defensively that changed the way football is played. And Bob Sanders is one of the 2. Bob, when I stepped the football field with him, Abdul and I stepped on the field the same year, that sophomore year with Bob, he set the tone on how to play. There's only one speed and one way to play. And you were going to meet Bob at the ball, right, and try to beat Bob to the ball. You knew how he was going to come. Like, how are you going to show up? And he just set the bar. And you have to have those guys that come through programs that change the program. And he certainly was one of those guys from a mentality standpoint. He's like, he don't give a shit. He's going to run through you. And that mentality, you have to have those guys that set the tone. And he was certainly one of them.
I suppose you have to watch out from behind too, of him hitting you.
Oh,
instead of the guy
absolutely. Yeah,
getting lit up from the back.
You always got to be mindful of where Bob is. This is not a secret story, but when we had full pads on and we were going live or even close to live thud, Bob couldn't be involved at practice. He couldn't play. He couldn't practice. He would sit on the sidelines and watch because he just destroyed people. And he didn't have, I'm going to go, you know what? I'm not going to eliminate my teammate. We're playing. We're competing. I'm not letting up because you're my boy. Like, we're going. And that's just a tone setter, man. I mean, it's rarely, in all my years of football, it's rare to find that level of a guy who just sets the tone the way he did. Even the pros, I play with only a few.
Yeah, that's impressive. So I guess that leads me to a question of, so you're doing the work, you have some success. What's the motivation? You get past the fear issue. What's the motivation to long term? Like, how did that play out? How did you keep that level up, and how did you keep that drive going?
I think just the brotherhood. Going to my sophomore year when I became a starter, then there's this idea of us trying to continually get better. Like, when you come in and watch film, I always think about why football is so great from like an accountability standpoint is when you come in and watch film, you're going to watch film in front of the team, mistakes, good plays. You're going to watch film in front of the whole defense, in front of the linebacker group, like so on and so forth. You break this thing down. The ability to look at the film and own mistakes in front of your brothers that you cared about the most, I think sets the tone for like where you want to go and how you want to improve. And you take coaching and then you go actually get better at it. For me, after we started our sophomore years, Abdul and we leaned on each other so much to improve ourselves. We're doing speed work in the summer. Like, we were getting after each other. Like, we were trying to break each other off. When we're in the weight room, he was certainly stronger than I was in most things, but like, he's challenging me in almost every lift to go match him. So I think when you got to that level of, okay, I'm good, now how do I continue this and continue to get better? It's just the brotherhood and the guys around you. And then you get young guys coming in, like Ed Miles that came in and played with us, and Grant Steen was leaving. These guys are just around. They were just excellent players. You wanted to make better and for each other. So I think it's just the brotherhood. And then this idea that I think, of course, you had the goal of being a pro. Like, you had that thought, but that wasn't why I went to work to do it. So I don't think I even really thought I would be a pro until maybe after my junior year, when you look up and, okay, I was just an All-American, had a good season. And like, you get an agent start to call you and say, hey, are you going to leave college early and come to the draft? I'm like, what are you talking about? I hadn't even thought about it, honestly. And then my name gets mentioned in like it was the 05 draft. At the end of the draft, they always do like a top 20 for next year or top 10 or whatever it was. And I was like really high on that list, top 5, I think, on that list of exiting seniors. And you're like, wow, like this could really happen. Like, I could be a pro. That's really where the first kind of thought even trickled in my mind that it could even happen, because you just don't know. There's so many factors. So I think just keeping your head down, the simplest explanation is usually the right one. Keep your head down and keep working with the right guys around you. And like, you just keep getting better and better. And then you got to go perform on Saturdays, right? That's at the end of the day, when the lights turn on, you got to go perform. And I was able to get that done too. So just an incredible experience in Iowa City.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun watching you. I think I realized how good an athlete you were when I went to Robert's camps and we were playing a little pickup game. It has the energy of a 12-year-old kid. He can run like a world-class sprinter, and he can jump about as high as a basketball player. I was like, wow. I was like, I did not get those tools. I'm like, man, I missed out on that stuff. So
I would say I got very lucky in the genetic lottery, and let's just be honest, right? That it comes down to that. A lot of it comes down to genetics. And but I can remember as a 12-year-old, and you guys know what I'm talking about, the strength shoes to make you jump higher had the platform.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I owned those, and I ran up and down my driveway doing the strength shoe stuff endlessly, summer after summer. I'm sure there's science that tells you you're an idiot for doing that because it didn't work, but it worked for me, dude. Because all of a sudden, like, I still own the state triple jump record. I could almost dunk from the free throw line when I was 195 in high school. I just missed one, like I was about this far inside. And of course, then I put on 30 pounds in college to play linebacker. So I couldn't quite carry that mass as far, but I just got lucky. And I think I talk about when I get to speak in front of groups, the non-negotiables, like the take no talents, right? Energy, enthusiasm, attitude, the things that you get to decide on a daily basis. Like when we wake up as grown men now with kids and responsibilities, like you still get to determine your energy, your enthusiasm about how you attack things. That energy for just be like, I don't know, for life, for football, for weightlifting, for whatever I'm doing. I've always, I think, just had that. I don't know if I make the decision. I just get to wake up with that kind of energy. It's a huge advantage. And when I'm 33 and I'm in my 11th year in the NFL, and it's a 6 a.m. lift on week 14, and you feel awful, but you run to that 6 a.m. lift with some Hank Williams Jr. on and you have your buddies in there, you go nuts because what else are you going to do? That's a decision I get to make. And then you're an energy bus for the rest of that room. I think people feed off of that.
So I want to go another little sidebar. So you've got some really successful kids in sports. How do you pass that along to them? I guess that's one of the questions. I have a young daughter, so how do I instill that in her? Or how do I light that fire? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh man, I got a long list of them for this one, but we have 4 daughters, 17, 14, 10, and 8. And when I retired, Madden our oldest was in 3rd grade. So my first actual thing I did post-career was to coach her 3rd grade basketball team. I loved basketball growing up. That's what I wanted to be as a pro, or I thought I wanted to go pro hoops. Clearly that didn't work out. But so I loved coaching her, and I loved the game planning. Like I'll literally watch 4th grade film, see what a team does, because there's film out there now on Facebook, and I can find it on the internet. And I love game planning. That was my whole career, was game planning against opponents and figuring out ways to win or how to improve. So social media comes around. My kids like to start playing basketball. I start looking at drills to help them improve. And the one thing I always wanted as a kid growing up was a hoop inside our barn or a shop. And we had a hoop outside in the gravel driveway. It just always drove me crazy. And so I built a gym in the house we built in 2012. And kids ride bikes and roller skate and do all sorts of stuff, right? But they also play hoops. And so when Madden started developing this love, I just fostered it. And the important thing was to also not be crazy, to make it fun. So we go to the gym, like I make it fun, I make it competition, I make it games. And then eventually, like in 6th, 7th grade, like she took it over. Like she wanted it. She saw how it made her feel, right? She saw how people thought about her. Because every gym I walked into, because Minnesota's got an incredibly good basketball culture up here. So every gym you walk into, like there's an expectation that, oh, that's Chad Greenway, like that his kid, like I wonder which one's her. Is she good? And like she had this like almost pressure on her as a young person to be good. But then she got good because she worked at it and liked it. I didn't make it a job for her. And then she took it herself. Like I just get to be dad. I don't coach her, I don't train her. Like she has an excellent high school coach. And once the kids develop that passion themselves, it's your job to foster it and to build a love for it. But then you just got to keep it fun and be dad. Because I didn't want her to look at me like, well, he's always complaining because I don't do this. Just, you know what? Let the coach do that. And it's worked. And then now that my oldest has been in that path and was getting an opportunity to play college basketball, like the next one loves it and the next ones love it. But they also are multi-sport. So they play soccer, they run track, they played baseball and softball growing up. So they play 3 sports in high school and then do basketball in the AAU circuit in the spring and summer. That's their kind of year round. So it has been the biggest joy of my life getting to watch my kids compete. They have a state tournament coming up this weekend. My oldest 2 play together on the high school team. So that's incredibly fun to watch their relationship grow. And it creates great opportunities. Madden's got a ton of opportunities in front of her. She's committed to the University of Kentucky, which didn't sit well with mom or dad or the entire Iowa fan base. We love Iowa for many reasons, including that women's basketball program. It's just been an incredible experience having my kids be involved in this way, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, it's great. We'll look forward to following her career. That's awesome. I'm sure it's been a wonderful experience, as you mentioned. Let's dive back into Iowa quick. As far as your on-field experiences, what's your biggest and best memories?
Oh man, that student section where it used to be located on the sidelines, that was so fun. I know they moved it back to the other corner now, but just running out in front of those fans, hearing the crowd, and then making a play, like making a defensive 3rd down stop, get an interception. Like you can watch some film of it back. There's always some film going around on Twitter or whatever, and you see it, you see the reaction. Like you just remember how you felt in that moment. I just don't think there's just not a feeling that you can even describe to people what that feels like to make a play in the arena and be the man in the arena under the pressure and go do it. It's just incredible. But in my personal experience, being a farm kid and the way that the entire state of Iowa embraced me when I went there, because of, I think, me as a player, but more so what I represented. Coming from a small town in South Dakota, I was just like the majority of kids that are growing up in Iowa. So I think people could relate to me. And I always felt like that connection to the state for that reason. And every corner I got to go around, as I talked about working for the athletic department, like that was a lot of the conversation. Oh, my kid's doing this. He's a farmer. He's out doing chores in the morning, just like you were. Like, we love watching you and telling that story. And now he has a goal to be able to do what you're doing. I think that connection is so unique in Iowa City. I don't know it to be any different anywhere else I've gone. I only went to one school, but everybody's had that same experience because of the people in Iowa. They're so kind. They have your back. And I think the response that kind of get reminded every once in a while was when Madden committed to Kentucky, big recruit. She has a big personal following on social media. The response from Hawkeye fans, we can't wait to watch you. Congratulations. We really want you to be a Hawkeye, but great to go carve your own path. It wasn't like this negative, why wouldn't you pick us? They understood what she was dealing with and the decision to make. And I think that just embodies what the fan base is about to me. And that's why I love it so much. And you love it even more when they treat your child with that same kind of respect and care.
Yeah, I can imagine. Hurls, you had more college questions, and we can go to the NFL?
No, I think that was it. Yeah, I just want to hear NFL experience and also carve a little time out for some of your charitable work too.
One thing we should touch on is like that, just as we talk about like college, like my favorite experiences, I'd say I was part of that team with the catch, Warren Holloway against LSU. To me, probably the most exciting win in potentially my whole career.
Nick and I were there.
What people don't remember, though, is that we had a really nice, comfortable lead, and the defense completely screwed the pooch in the second half. And we essentially got Jamarcus Russell, top 5 pick overall, because of how he played, come in. It was like, I remember that guy walking off the sideline. I was like, what is this creature? 6'5", massive arm. Just, what in the world? Like, I don't remember any quarterbacks looking like that in South Dakota growing up. And this dude just absolutely snipes us, and they come back and take the lead. And I'm on the sideline. What just happened? Like, the defense that you could always count on that was going to be solid and stable and make things really hard. And we had done really good against this LSU team that they just ran their mouth all week at bowl week about how they were going to whoop us. And we were letting it happen. I was just devastated. For then that to flip completely on its head in a minute, you can't describe how sports move you in that way, which emotionally, from literally here I am, like a really experienced junior, 2-year starter, and I'm literally just completely on a knee, buckled with what we just did and how we gave this thing up. And then to be completely rejoiced and like emotional the other way, literally 10 seconds later, it's just crazy. I know every Hawkeye fan that follows football knows what we're talking about. We talk about that game, and to hear Dolph call that back about how we need to take a timeout and got to make this is the final play, and then all of a sudden it's a catch, a touchdown, and there's a mob scene in the end zone. Just absolutely ridiculous how that worked out.
We want to give a shout out to a fellow Hawkeye, Chad Greenway, and his company Grey Duck Vodka. This isn't a paid ad. We just love supporting Iowa guys doing big things. Grey Duck Vodka is in over 2,000 stores and bars across Minnesota, Iowa, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Find them at greyduckspirits.com. If you're in the Midwest, grab a bottle and support a Hawkeye alum. And remember, get the duck out. Great, the stories that come out of sports, right? They're just like built in, the ups, the downs, just the drama that builds in is wild, right? At that game, I think I was on the sidelines for a minute at that game with my brother. And it's just, out of control. It's so much fun that way. I think you learn so many things and all that from all these experiences, right? It's really a building thing.
Not to put a downer on it, but then the following bowl game,
we have to talk about
back.
this.
You have to come back. People are going to be mad if we don't talk about it.
This is the thing I get hit up on X or Twitter the most is that I was not offsides in the Outback Bowl in 2006. For those that are trying to remember what I'm talking about, it was an onside play. We're down 7. We had been making a really good run the second half. The Gators were in the lead. We get the onside kick, and for all intents and purposes, the way that game was going, we were going to go score. They could not stop us in that second half. And we had all the momentum, and I got called offsides. And then, of course, it was very well documented that I was not offsides at all when that kick was taken. And, of course, all of Iowa Hawkeye football across the country has to bring it up every year. And for good reason. We should make sure they remember that those refs sucked and we got completely jobbed out of that game.
I think it was at that game too. Yeah, it was so frustrating because you didn't know, and then you find out later when you see the film, you're like, oh, it wasn't even that close.
I can remember being out that night with my family. That was my last college football game. You're gonna go pro in a couple of weeks, right? You're gonna be doing a bunch of other stuff and have other stress. But in that moment, we were really trying to celebrate just the career and the season and everything else. And we're a bunch of us all together. And I remember somebody had a printout back in 06, technology, a printout screenshot of me being on sides. And I was just like, no way. Because at that point, I didn't know. Like, nobody really had talked about it until I saw that screenshot. And then it became a whole thing.
And I think that's one thing with our podcast. We realized that we put the fans and the players together. Of, yeah, we're still upset about those things too.
Yeah,
so
yes.
we can understand you guys' pain. We're in this together. It's like, dude, this is like a together thing. Like that game we had that didn't go right, or our play that didn't work out. We're still harboring that as well. So it's a shared burden for sure.
Yes, 100%.
That's amazing. All right, let's go into the combine quick if you want to do that, and then it's part of your NFL career if you want.
So the next thing I did was you basically go to the Senior Bowl, and as a senior, you're leaving college, you're going to go prove again, right, that you're good enough after all the film they watched, and NFL scouts are starting to circle around. You're trying to identify where you think you could potentially get drafted, and now it's go time. The Senior Bowl was a great week for me. When the Vikings ended up drafting me, they really referenced my play down there and my ability to play football as the biggest thing, right? So it wasn't a fluke. When you go there to an all-star game, but you realize this is a really important interview for the whole week, teams to meet you. And then you go to the combine, which is a completely different experience. I had an awful combine. It didn't run as well as everybody thought I would run. I had never anything below 4.6. I was always in the mid 4.5s to low 4.6 categories in my 40 at 243 pounds. And that's why the NFL scouts loved me. And then you watch the tape, and I felt like I played like I could run. But you kind of transition, and I go run really poorly and perform poorly at the combine. You think, is my whole career now going to come down to a couple of days of performance? And the thing for me that it didn't, and that was the nice part, is did I lose some money on combine day? Maybe, potentially my draft position, but inevitably what happened is you get drafted by the team that really wanted you and was invested in you and end up being able to play for. It all worked out great, getting to play in one team my whole career. But the craziest part is a lot of people don't remember is 2006 NFL draft. I got taken by the Vikings at number 17 overall, and the defensive coordinator was Mike Tomlin. It was just 1 year with the Vikings, and he came from Tampa, and they played the Tampa 2 system, where his linebacker for a lot of his career down there was Derek Brooks, who was one of the best all time to play that position in Tampa 2, really set the bar. And I met with him, and he showed a bunch of clips of my Senior Bowl, like in game, in practice, doing the things that they expected somebody in the Tampa 2 system to do. And I felt like the Vikings would take me based off of his conversation with me. And then sure enough, I get taken in that draft. And I didn't know at the time. I wasn't a huge Vikings fan growing up, to be honest. I was more of a 49ers fan because I was a bandwagon guy in the 90s. They were winning all the time. And I loved Steve Young as a quarterback. I was like, I make fun of all these Chiefs fans now, but it's like, man, I was one of those guys in the 90s. And I love Steve Young and Ronnie Lott. Those are my guys. And so the Vikings fans, we watched the Vikings every week because they were always on in South Dakota. It's a 4.5-hour drive to the Twin Cities. And to get drafted to Minnesota after being South Dakota to Iowa to Minnesota, like, I didn't realize how lucky I was. Then I started having kids, and now your friends, your family can be a part of your career. Like, they can be a part of they can drive over the border and watch you play. I started having kids, like grandma can drive over and see the grandkids. Like, it all worked out so well, and I got so lucky in that regard. And then a great gallery story, and this is a crazy connection, is my first preseason game, I tear my other ACL, the one that I did in college. I did my left one in the NFL. And we played Robert and the Raiders that game. And I think your folks had gotten a box, or Robert had gotten a box from a Hawkeye fan that was also a Viking fan, and he had a box he wasn't going to use. And your crew was up there. And my family went in the box as well. They invited my family in. They were going to play the whole thing. And I tear my ACL like in the first play. And my parents' wife never sat in a box again the rest of my career. They thought that was
wow. Yeah. Superstition, right?
Yeah, you try to go from the outhouse to uptown, and you go sit in the suite, and then all of a sudden you tear an ACL. They're like, okay, we just got to stay blue collar. We're going to be in the normal seats.
Oh, God. Yikes.
Yeah, so it worked out, though. 10 years later, 11 years later, it ended up having a good career and had a lot of fun, a great experience.
And your wife was Iowa too, right?
My wife, Jenny, ran track and cross country. So she was a walk-on to the track team, and she ended up being a 2-time captain. Accounting degree from Iowa, loves Iowa City. Same experience I had. A great experience. Ended up having a really great career. And the crazy part is when we talk all the time about what the track team, they're taking 15 passenger vans and buses, and then we're flying all over the place. And of course, we always have that banter and conversation about how posh the football team was. But her experience was incredible. For her to go there and become a 2-time captain, it just embodies what Iowa athletics are all about. Is that you're going to take anybody who's going to come in and work and grind for the right reasons, and you can work your way up and become a captain of the track team as a walk-on and be able to compete in the Big Tens. So, yeah, just Hawkeyes for life in our house, obviously.
That's great. Yeah, I guess it's a rare thing for someone to play their whole career at one team these days too, right? So to have that longevity, to do that, to also have these really huge setbacks early in your career on both kind of college and pros, that says a lot to your mentality and your work ethic and all those things, because some guys don't come back with those, right? You blow your knee out, you're not the same person, or you have an injury that changes you materially, I think either mentally and physically possibly. So to do that, once you got to the NFL, was there, I guess this piece, we just talked to Jared DeVries, and he played for 11 years with the Lions, and he saw the game in such a minute detail that I thought was interesting, that was allowed him to be as good as he was. He was like, no wasted movements and some of these other things. Is there things you can talk about specific to your position of what did you do that allowed you to be successful? Obviously the physical and that part, but like the mental and the little parts that you saw. Can you talk to that quick?
Yeah, when you talk about the ACL injury in the NFL, it was full-time IR back then. I tore it in August, training camp time, spring preseason game. So like I had a full year to essentially sit, watch, learn. That year, essentially, I got a redshirt year in the NFL. And it was honestly the biggest advantage I have. So people talk about the injury and the setback, but really I was under contract. I was getting paid, going to rehab, and getting the best rehab in the world. And I'm watching Steve Hutchinson, now Hall of Famer, left guard, how he approaches meetings and lift in a season. I'm watching Ben Lieber, who's one of my closest and best friends, play linebacker, like how he studies film, how I'm in every meeting with him, understanding what he's looking for, what he's looking at to try to get an advantage of 5-year. He's in his 5th year at the time. I'm watching these guys. Jim Kleinsaucer, one of the just absolute freaks that I played with, that played H-back tight end, like how he practiced in week 15, like how he got after people in practice, even though he had just played 14 games before. Like you watch and learn and observe and take in and say, okay, that's what the best are doing. That's how I'm going to approach things. So I come in 2007 and starting the linebacker. The best part for me, another advantage, was Adrian Peterson was drafted that year. So like the attention was all on him because he was just blowing up. And I got to just sit under the radar, which is what I felt like I did best. Like I didn't want to have that pressure on you all the time of being that first round pick. It's not ever a part of what small town kid, an underdog, you go to Iowa and the underdog is just an easier position to be in. Now all of a sudden you're a first round pick with all this pressure. Like you better perform or else we're going to find somebody else who can. Like it allowed me to slide under the radar and just get to work and then start stacking games. And then as I gained experience in the NFL, like the thing about the NFL locker room is you get no respect until you go play. Like I don't care how high of a pick, how much money they spend on free agency. Like none of it matters until the locker room says, oh, all right, this dude can go play. Like he can go play on Sundays and get the job done. We're going to gain some respect for him. The subtleties, like when it comes down to like gaining an advantage, I think you are never going to be the physically most gifted guy on the field. It's just not possible. These guys are all studs, freaks, you name it, right? So you have to find your advantage and what you're good at. To me, like my ability to take in a play and what's going to happen and let my instincts take over and let me just go play really set me apart for part of my career where I was able to separate myself, and was because I was able to know what they're going to run at a certain set. So when you break down a film, like there's so many things to look at, but I'm looking at the quarterback's feet. I'm looking at the depth of the running back and his eyes. I'm looking at every alignment. I'm seeing if it's light hands, heavy hands. I'm looking at one of the guards is set back a little further than the other guard because he might be trying to pull and clear. I'm looking at every motion. I'm looking at every alignment of my receiver outside of me because that's going to dictate the route or if he's trying to crack or get an advantage in a defensive blocking situation. Is that tight end like a half step removed than normal because he's trying to release and get out and get away from the defensive end for a pass route? Like those subtleties there's millions more, right? But the idea is like, how do I take film and take motion, sets, alignments, depth, and reduce their playbook down to 10%, 5%, to now I know within a mean of 5 to 10 plays what they could do on this, all while happening within a second or two pre-snap, and then adjusting on the fly and making a play. But I can't tell you, like thinking back to, especially when we were in the Tampa 2 system early on, like you get a light guard and a pull power play away from you. There's a small gap in the backside A gap that I could shoot and go get a TFL. But if the window closes and I don't make it, my gap is now open and could be exploited. Understanding when to take that risk and when not to take that risk. If you take that risk, you better make the play. If you make that play enough, pretty soon they pay you to keep making that play. So just assessing those risk categories to where I can't just go out on a limb to go make a play and leave my brothers out to dry, but there's these small windows of time where you can put perfect footwork, see that guard pull, shoot that gap hard, get that other guard arm off of you and make that play in the backfield. Everybody goes crazy, but nobody saw the work put in to get that done in film, in study, and then to go make the play. And that's what obviously organizations are looking for, is solid, stable guys they can count on in the locker room, in the weight room, in an organization, but also can you play? And I think one of the biggest abilities I took from Iowa was we never played nickel, or very rarely played nickel. So we never really brought a DB in. I was the guy who walked out into space and was covering receivers and tight ends out in open space. So then the Vikings became really comfortable with me walking out in our Tampa 2 system and not having to play nickel as often. So we could keep more linebackers on the field, be better against the run, but also be solid against the pass. So what I was able to learn and do at Iowa set me up completely for what I did my first 8 years in the Tampa 2 system. And then my 9th year, Coach Zimmer comes in and the system just blows up in my face and it's something completely different. But it was so fun to learn something new and just be something different. The film study piece of the NFL is wild. Like the detail, like I can watch a game now. If I'm sitting with buddies, and usually I just casually watch a game, but if my buddies are like, hey, what's going to happen here? And I look at, oh, here's the safeties. They're inverted. They're out. They're sitting Tampa 2. They're showing. Harrison Smith's walking down. What are we going to do? And then the play starts, and you can see the movements in the back end, and then people start to look at what's actually going on, and they're like, holy shit, like we had no idea what that was like. And the wildest part is when Zimmer came in, like, pre-snap, because we're such a heavy pressure team with Zimmer, like pre-snap, we're listening to what the center said on the protections, and we would take the film, the TV copy film, because the referee started to wear microphones. If you remember that, they changed that. You could hear what every O-line check was or the quarterback was saying. We were literally blitzing based off of their communication. If they would change their protections, we're changing our blitz. So you go from blitzing the A-gap and having no responsibilities to all of a sudden you're covering the slot on the left side, and it all changed within half a second pre-snap. And it's just wild. If people can't fathom until you go out there and just do it and really see what's going on.
That's interesting to hear that in depth, because I remember watching games, just being in football a little more than the average person. I'd be like, oh, look at that play. And they're like, wait, the guy got tackled for a 2-yard loss. I was like, you didn't see this block or something. But to see it at that level would be even more amazing, just like the super intricate parts of that piece. I think one other thing, when you mentioned you were like a 17th overall pick or whatever it was, I think there's that part of, if you go to a system and a team that is running efficiently, that makes a huge difference, right? If you're a top 10 pick, you're expected to turn a program around. You're expected to do these things with probably pieces that are missing, or like a really dysfunctional, some sort of it to cause them to be in that position. So I think that's another great thing. You were a top pick. Again, like you said, they weren't going to cut you. They were going to give you the chance to do all that stuff. So that's great that you had that opportunity, and to people to understand that part of, it's great to come in and learn, and not to be like, here, you're the franchise, take care of us. You're like, okay, wait, this is a mess, and I can't do this
exactly. I can't say enough. I can't stress enough in the draft. It's more about luck, to be honest with you. It's not even in most cases. It was an advantage back in my era to be drafted high, because the money was so much different, and the money at the top of the draft was really good. But to your point, then you're going to an organization is usually got something negative going on, something defunct. There's a reason they're there. But you can get this from time to time, an organization has a bad year, gets an injury, whatever happens. For the most part, there's those bottom dwellers that are just always struggling. For me to be in the middle of the first round, you get the Vikings, like we're always winning. Like they always do well, always above 500, always competing for the playoffs, and a new coach, new ownership, and then the scheme you get drafted into. It's no different than recruiting, right? Just except you're being more detailed on, we think you fit our puzzle piece. We need you to come do that. That doesn't always happen. That doesn't always work out. Like a quarterback, you can see a quarterback that gets drafted to an organization and just completely doesn't work out. Sam Darnold's a perfect example, our Viking this year. Like, gets drafted to the Jets in an awful situation on a team that doesn't really know what they're doing. He struggles, bounces around, comes to the Vikings with a really good coach and a lot of stability, and has a year where now he's going to get paid $100+ million because he's had such a good year. Like, those guys are still talented, but sometimes they didn't get put in the right system, and the system is everything. It's everything. I got put in a system that perfectly fit what I did, behind really good defensive line that allowed me to make plays. Kevin Williams should be in the Hall of Fame as a 3 technique, and I played behind that dude for 9 years. Like, dude's a complete stud. So, like, that all, as good as I was or think I was or people thought I was, is like so many good people were around you to make you good.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
great.
I had a question. So was there any backs that you had to second guess, like going and shooting? And
it goes back to my Norm Parker days. Norm used to be on my ass because Abdul was the perfect child. He always did the right thing. He was a complete thumper in the box, like just a stud. And I was that rogue guy that took some risk and chances, all within I wouldn't go out of my way and lose my gap to make a play. I'm sure I did, but I wouldn't always do it. It's assessing that risk. But then in the Gopher game, when they had Maroney and Barber on my junior year, when their running game was just dumb good. They ran all this zone scheme. Well, in the zone scheme, there's these chances that if that old line like holds too long to the D lineman, like I could shoot that gap. So, and I did that a lot. And Norm was always on my butt for just playing it straight, like hat in hands, get a body on him. And I'm like, dude, I'm about to go shoot this gap and get a bucket and a negative 5-yard loss. And so the end of that game at the Metrodome, like they're positioning themselves to go, they're just running the ball down our throat against a really good defense we had. And I take a risk and take a shot. And it was like a 6-yard loss to then put them way back in like a 50+ yard field goal that they missed and we win. And I just look at Norm and he's like, that time it's okay. So, yeah, that time it's okay. But the other 500 times you've been bitching at me about doing it. And so he liked it when I did it that time, though. But you got to know who you're dealing with when it comes to a back, when it comes to an offensive line. What are you dealing with? Who is controlling that B gap that you're trying to run through? If it's Brian Waters from the Chiefs, one of the best O-linemen I played against, like, I don't recommend it, dude. Like, I would just play it straight. If it's Trent Williams, left tackle for the Niners, like literally probably the best O-lineman I've ever played against, you ain't trying him because he's more athletic. He's faster than you, probably better looking, stronger, the whole 9 yards. You don't have any advantage. So just play your position and roll. But then there's other chances you have to take. Because if you're just a robot, especially in the NFL, right, and you make the plays coming your way, it's great. But in the NFL world, we're always trying to replace you with somebody cheaper and younger. So you got to really find that balance of being a consistent performer they can count on, but also you got to make plays. Like you play linebacker in the league, you got to have takeaways. You got to be on fumble recoveries, causing fumbles, getting interceptions, all while doing your job of making tackles. If you're rushing the passer, you sure as hell be getting to the quarterback, right? That's your job. And if you're not, they're going to find somebody cheaper, younger to do it.
I think I'm going to go lift some weights right now.
Yeah. I probably should
I'm going to squat 500. You got me all fired up. This is amazing. Yeah. This is awesome. Who is the biggest freak you've seen in the NFL? Like physically, you were just like, that person is out of control.
Yeah. There's 4 guys for sure. You kind of look to and be like, these dudes, I'm talking about who I played with, who I saw operate day to day. There's freaks.
Yeah, for sure.
Jim Kleinsaucer was like the OG freak when I walked into the building with the Vikings. This dude is 6'5", 280, can run, is twice as strong as you, like massive dip in, just a huge lipper, coffee in his hand, sets it down and just moves the most weight like you've ever seen. And you're just like, what do I do? If he blocks you, like what am I going to do? I'm just like a wiggling fish. Like it's over. Adrian Peterson, when you get to that level, there's certain things where you're like, my eyes have never seen something like that before. Like when he got the ball and explodes out, I've never seen somebody run with that power and explosiveness. And I remember the first mini camp I saw him, we were in shorts and underwear, right, running around playing football. And this dude is different. Percy Harvin was from Florida. He played receiver for us. He's a guy who, if he could have got out of his own way, he'd be an HOF player. He had the quickest 10-yard, quickest burst explosiveness that I've ever seen. Steve Hutchinson, Hall of Fame left guard, detailed, smart, strong, prepared, just had checked every box. Compete level was crazy. Mean streak, just had it all. One of the best left guards to ever play. These guys they're just a level, just a bar above. There's just another level to these 1%ers. There's like the 1% of the 1%. These guys just exist out there on earth. And you're like, sometimes you run into them and you have to play against them. And you're like, freaks. Like Trent Williams, when I first saw him come out of Oklahoma, I was just like, what is this? This guy is 3'10", runs like a running back, linebacker, legitimately, athletic as heck, like getting out and pulling in space. And he's mean. Like, he's not nice at all. He's not kind. and like, you just can't do things with these guys. You just got to survive it. And so you got to try to figure out a way to win against these dudes. It's like impossible. And then you think about across the league. Remember when Cam Newton came into the league? We played him for the first time. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, where are these guys coming from? Guys like 6'5", 245, 250, like running like that. And these guys come in the league every year. You see them, and they're just specimens. And then you're 33, you realize, how the hell am I going to keep doing this? You know what? I'm actually going to check out. We're going to retire. We're done here. Nice run, dude, but it's over for you.
That's funny. Yeah, it's a humbling experience, right? It can be at all times, I'm sure. But
yeah, I mean, these guys are just different, and it's to be able to survive and live in that world for 11 years was incredible. I think the perspective of anything when you become a pro is people have an idea of what that is and what it's like. What's this sexy position? You have all this huge platform. And I know, Brian, you talked about a little bit about our foundation work and our give back. Like, the one thing I grew up around, being a farm kid, that we didn't have a lot of money, but my parents would always donate meat over the holidays, and they would donate to the church, would give it out to families that needed it so they could sit around a table and have a meal. So I came from that world, a small town community, and give back. So when I came to the NFL, like, the Vikings were very good about getting me involved in the community and introducing you to the community and the media, et cetera. And then in 2008, after we had our daughter, like, we started a foundation, a Lead the Way Foundation is called, that we started in 2008, and there was a give back to children with childhood diseases. So now we work with 12 hospitals across the Midwest, from Iowa City up to Fargo to Sioux Falls, and a bunch here in the metro, Minneapolis, on creating programming for moms of these sick kids, for the sick kids, and working with the hospitals. So I always thought that, like, eventually you're going to retire and be done, and people are going to forget about the fact that you played football, because there's going to be some new shiny toy, and they're going to be really good, and the football piece will be over and just be a has-been. Or can you stand for something else, and can you give back to the community, embrace the community, and community we now live in and stay here? It just meant more, a better connection, a bigger connection to Minnesota. Because, listen, they gave me 11 great years as being fans and supporters. It's the least I can do. And now these families and women that we've met that are dealing with these childhood diseases and issues just year after year, and having your own kids, knowing that could be you tomorrow. Like, childhood disease does not care how much money you have in the bank. I promise. Like, it's going to happen regardless. So just knowing that could be you, and just putting good karma out in the world, it feels really good. And now having kids that you want to have go out and impact. My 17-year-old going to go to Kentucky in a year. Like, we're getting her involved with the NMDP, with the bone marrow registry, because my dad passed away of leukemia. So he got a stem cell transplant from the registry. So now Madden is going to get involved in that and go to Kentucky with more than just, hey, I'm an athlete. Yeah, but what else are you? Like, great, you're an athlete. That's awesome. You got to stand for more than that. So I feel like the value, it comes from how I was raised with the people that raised me. And then you go to Iowa City and you're involved in the children's hospital down there, and you go and do hospital visits, and you just realize there's a bigger picture out there. I thought Iowa did a great job of framing that up, and then the Vikings did as well. It gave me the platform to create this foundation. It's been really important in our lives.
Yeah, thanks for walking us all through that. I really enjoyed, like, all the pieces that feels like you've nailed, and you're going in a great direction with all this stuff. And it's good to hear that. It's good to, I think, for people to hear and understand those things, of the difference of being a player versus a person and stuff like that. So I think it's got my wheels turning inside, which
yeah,
It's good. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the most important thing I'll leave you guys with that I've learned I'm 42, right? 4 kids. And I think the thing that I've learned the most is the people you surround yourself dictate your outcome. I've been it's really luck, right? But like lucky the fact that a guy reached out to Coach Ferentz and said, "Hey, you got to look at this kid." Go to the Iowa program with Coach Ferentz and Coach Doyle, who literally just developed bringing these boys together and making men out of us. They were put in my life, and the people that were in my recruiting class and the guys that were older than me that I got to learn from, they were put in my life. You surround yourself, and I can remember myself. There's guys that I was recruited with that kind of went down this path, and then they went down this path. I'm like, who do I want to be? Like, what makes me feel right? I make those choices to go down a good path and be with the right people who are doing the right things. It's no different when you become a pro. Like, I could have been running around out at the clubs being crazy, right, not being at home raising my kids, but like my priorities were set based off how I grew up and the people that were around me to say, you know what? Like Ben Lieber was brought in as a free agent to the Vikings the same year I was brought in. Steve Hutchinson was a free agent brought in the same year I was brought in. These guys are families. They had wives. I watched how they treated their wives, how they treated the waitress, how they treated their kids. Like, you learn from these good people. And I always, when I get to talk to groups, especially groups that you look at a banker who's been a banker for 30 years in the same bank, right? Do you look at your circle of people and be like, you know what? This guy is dragging me down all the time. I got to unload him from my circle, because you got to find people that are around you that make you better. And then you have to make people better by holding each other accountable. And I think it's so important as men, especially, like going through, it's just so easy to take the easy way out these days, being distracted with social media or these other things, that people forget the main thing, the priorities. And when you surround yourself with really good people, including your spouse, it just makes it easier to make the right decision, because the people around you are making the right decisions. It's not abnormal to take the easy way out. And that's the big thing I've learned the most. And it starts with me having great parents and getting really lucky with the people that have been put in my life.
Yeah, thanks for that. Do you want to throw out a shout out to your vodka?
Yeah, man. Yeah, like we should have. I mean, if we could have done this at 6 p.m., we could have had a cocktail in our hands.
Oh, you guys aren't drinking right now? Oh, shit.
Yeah. Great Duck Spirits. We started 6 years ago now. And that is a wild business now. Let me tell you something. It is competitive as heck. We didn't know a whole lot about it. And it's like you kind of learn as you go a little bit. And I got great partners that are hard workers. Introduced to me by Sean Considine, who grew up with one of my partners in Byron, Illinois. So like the network of Iowa, right? Putting good people in your life. These partners are incredible. They're hard workers. They're all up here in Minnesota with me now, but they're from kind of different parts of the country. And we grind, man. We build our business by shaking hands and doing the right thing. And our vodka, we sold 26,000 cases of vodka last year, predominantly in the state of Minnesota. We've grown and we've gotten big, and we've done it the right way. And now we have multiple products out there. And it's fun to grow something and to be a part of something. It's a hard business. It's not easy, but find out that even if it's a spirits business or if it's football or if it's life, when you shake somebody's hand, look them in the eye, do what you say you're going to do, and have integrity, you really can't lose, right? You might have to build it slower rather than going buying things, but you build it slower, you build it the right way, you build a strong foundation. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's been crazy. I never thought I would own a spirits company, but here we are, and it's fun.
That's awesome. Nice. Great. Thank you, sir. That was
so much.
amazing. We could stay here all day and listen to the stories, but we'll definitely let you go.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always fun to get on and talk about. I think people have an idea of what it takes, but they don't really know the ins and outs of the programs. I guess when you say luck, it's truly luck, right? I know you make your own luck sometimes, but man, the people that got put in my life are so fortunate at that time. Lucky dude, man. I can't thank you guys enough for having me on, getting to tell my story, and hopefully some Hawkeye fans out there will listen and love it.
Yeah, sounds great. Good luck. All kids too. Yeah, we'll be watching.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right.
Okay.
Take care, man. Cheers.
As we wrap up this episode, Brian and I had a great conversation about something Chad Greenway touched on: what really separates successful people from the rest. It's not always just talent. A lot of it's the mindset, the habits, the work ethics, the ability to adapt when things don't go your way, and also the ability to see small details to slow the game down. So we dug into that, why people thrive under pressure while others don't, and how small decisions every day add up to long-term success. Stick around for this bonus discussion. Thanks for joining us.
So, I think it was interesting to hear Chad talk about the little things he picks up. And I think a lot of very subtle little keys and cues from their opponents that make them successful to be able to have that longevity. But there's also just that, and I don't know if it's learned or taught at a young age, but just go, don't give up, work your ass off. You were going to say something about, is that really, is that built in through farm life or your parents, or is it something you're born with?
I think we all have that. I think everyone we played with who gets to the college level has that mechanism of don't give up, because you've got to go through stuff to get there, right? You've got to go through injuries. You've got to go through not having the right coach. You have all these things against you, right?
I'd say if you successfully get through college, then yes.
If you even get to college, you have to have some sort of motor to get through college, right? To show up at Iowa or wherever else, you've got to have some sort of mechanism of I need to get better, whether it's a fear, whether it's I want to prove someone wrong, whether I want to get out of the situation I'm in, all these different pieces. I'm thinking about it when I'm hearing Chad talk about that, or Jared, that's basically the one thing they're doing. They're just that's the one thing. Take that window and make that smaller. Some people are like, oh, I like to have fun. I like to go do X, or I like to do Y. I'm not saying they didn't have fun, but I think it's a bunch of things. Some of it's athleticism, right? Chad is a really gifted, talented athlete, really top. He's probably in that middle top percentage, I would think. He can run, he can jump, he's 240. Physically, I was like, oh wow, yeah, you've got the skills, you've got that power. And I think some of it is luck or timing. He got to go to the Vikings when they were good. If you're in a good system, that hides a lot of flaws. But if you're out there on your own, battling something that doesn't work, a coach that doesn't work, or those things, that's hard. But I think it's it got refined. He's a guy that went in with Coach Doyle, and Coach Doyle, I'm sure he was, here's a playbook of if you want to go be a spectacular athlete, you do these things. And there's guys like Chad or Robert Gallery, or that are just going to be yes, I want this, and I'm going to do exactly what you tell me to do. And so you get a guy like that starts it, right? You get there from your own whatever, or your own coaches or your parents. Then you get to that point where it's this coach takes and says, okay, here's a playbook. You want to show up every day and do these things and get better this little bit at a time. And I think that's the part translated to the pros. Then it's, okay, you've seen enough football. Okay, to some degree, you pick these things up even if you don't even notice it, right? You're okay, your brain's oh, I've seen this a million times. I've seen this guard sit back. I've seen the receiver do this. I've seen X and Y, and all these things happen. It's a pattern recognition. And then at that point, then you're the game slows down, and you're okay, I can put myself here. I know not to be there. He's played thousands of snaps or whatever it is. And I think you have that part. You had that go work hard, right? You kicked a million balls. You went out and you were doing everything you can, but maybe you weren't able to see, and I probably wasn't able to see, hey, if you did this little 2% over here, that would have gave you another 5% bump, right? Or whatever that is to get you past that. Right. You were there, right? I mean, you had the leg, you had the skills, but it's just those little parts.
Persistence, and then also the doing it the correct way that maximizes that effort. So you got to have the effort, and you got to do it the best way, and have a little bit of luck. I mean, I think that's kind of those combinations, and that persistence and that hard work could be you ingrained with it. You come in with that. It's just your attitude, or you were raised that way, or your attitude that you were born with, or you pick it up seeing other people do it, and I got to make myself into that kind of person to compete. And so I think that's how some guys come in with that, and others develop it through the program because they're oh, this is how you do it. And I know I have to keep up with this persistence and this drive, or I'm going to fall behind. The guys that are successful, make it to the NFL or do well at Iowa, figure out they have to have that persistent drive or they won't make it.
Yeah, I mean, you got to figure out the other pieces.
It's not enough just that, but it helps.
Yeah, it's not enough for the drive. Everybody's got that drive. Everybody's I want to go play.
Some guys get it later and they pick it up, or they have it they have the drive for different reasons, but you have to get it at some point, whether the program develops it or you bring it to the program when you arrive. But then those other pieces are the difference there, right? The scheme, the teammates, luck, all that stuff that makes you successful.
I'm sure it's the coach's culture, right? Of you're going to show up, you're going to lift this, you're going to do this. They have to come in with that. The Bob Sanders piece is probably the same, right? You've got to have that culture of someone's got to be that person who's, okay, this is what we're doing and this is how we're going to perform and how we show up. I think our senior year, some of our captains or our big time players, Ross Verba, Tim Dwight, they took more of a forward momentum of, okay, this is how we're playing. This is who we are as a team. Seeing like firsthand as far as like Parcells and some of his tactics, there was a bunch of different stuff. Like I was at the Eagles for a second when they were just like a mess, right? And you could tell everybody was just like, okay, we're goofing off at practice. And there wasn't this work pail mentality. It was just like, oh, we're going to go party all night. We're going to show up hungover to practice. And at the end of the year, I'm sure it was like a free for all anyway. And then you go to our Parcells team and he's like, okay, I'm going to come into a bad team. I'm going to take 30% of the team out. I'm going to change that culture. I'm going to put in guys that are going to show up and do those things and know how to perform and know how to put in the work. Some of them might be crazy people, but they're going to show up and do the things they're supposed to do as far as like partying and that stuff, but they're going to do the things they're supposed to do. And then that sets that mind frame of what do we do? How do we do it? What's expected?
Yeah. So there's a lot of factors. Some are under your control, some are not. There is a lot that is under your control. And I like how Chad talked about that. Your attitude showing up each day, the work ethic, hitting the gym, being a good teammate, all that is under your control. And you may not be 6'4" and you may not be able to run, but you can develop your skills, you can get better, and there is a lot that is under control, and luck plays into it. It doesn't guarantee success, but the more of those you do, the higher chance you will have. That's all you can do.
Yeah, and I guess if I could look back, then you would almost start to really dig into each of the things that you're doing, right? You'd be like, okay, is this the right spot for me? Is this the right team? Is this the right culture? Am I getting these guardrails of, am I going to have someone who's like, okay, you're off the wrong path, you're going to put you back in, or are you going to be like, okay, I'm going to let you go off to the side? You see these guys that have played and their sons or daughters go into the professional leagues and do well because they're sitting back and saying, I've seen this thing and I know how to operate within it, instead of any of us where it's, oh shit, this is brand new. We're like, oh, okay, you're making the trail, right? You're making the trail and your trail might be like, oh, I went over here, that doesn't work. I went over here. You have to do it yourself where someone's, okay, if you want to do this, here's the path. You stay in this path.
Yeah,
and if you don't want to, you don't do the work. But if you do, then you do it that way.
Yeah, if we had, not to get too deep, but if everyone lived their life multiple times, if you followed that roadmap, there's people that would end up in the same place. Chad Greenway probably will end up in the NFL every time he runs through this. His life started over, he'll probably end up in the same spot again because he's got all those things lined up. But he goes to the wrong team, we might not be talking about his NFL career, right? But he probably would have still ended up in a good situation. He could have ended up at NDSU very easily or South Dakota and probably would have been All-American there, right? Because he's got most of those tangibles in place and good coaching, but he could have also, a rare chance, he could have ended up in a program that was struggling, went through a coaching change, gets the wrong injury at the wrong time. There's no guarantee, but if you're doing 90% of the right things, it'll probably turn out pretty well. And the things that you can't control, you can probably overcome or to just be unfortunate. But that's all you can really do is say, here's the roadmap. And if you do this as well as you can, your odds go up of having the things that you want to achieve.
There's a lever probably that you have the skill and the want, right? You have the passion that'll get you 70% of the way, probably, right? Just some pure, I want to get this done would get you 70%. Then you probably have little levers that are just little things that would be like, okay, another little like portion more. And then if you line those all up, then it's like you got the mental, the physical, the work ethic, the motivation, that stuff puts together, then that gets you 95% of the way. So I think it's probably all that stuff, right? I guess to me, that's what's interesting of all these different players, whether they were walk-ons to 11-year vets. It's just like you see that progression, right? At least to me, it feels like there's that progression of, okay, you got this sorted, you got that sorted, or you got this path that was lucky for you. You met this person, or that person did that for you. It's just funny, the little bits along the way. And I think also people try to game that to some degree of, oh, I'm going to force my kid to do this. I'm going to force my kid to do that. And you're like, it has to be a bit of all of that, right? It's same scenario.
I think, yeah, he's doing that with his kids, right? He's trying to give them that roadmap. And part of that roadmap is don't go too hard, because if they don't like it, they're going to give up on it and quit. And so you got to guide them in a way, but not too harshly, where you have to back away and say they have to find their own passion around it. Otherwise, this isn't going to work out. And so that's a fine line to balance. And I know this can be successful for you. I've gone through this before. I've seen how other people have done it. You can do this, but not pushing it and say, you got to take it at some point on your own and run with this. Or I'm going to be the imposing dad. And you see this too. Like, kids just say, I don't want to do this anymore. I hate this because my parents are so overbearing.
I guess it's a good analogy of him shooting the gap to get the running back. It's like, you have to know when to shoot that gap and have the restraint to be like, okay, my kid needs to do this themselves, and that I'm not going to get them there if they don't want to. Yeah, it's interesting.